ask unanimous...
Senator from New Hampshire is recognized.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with, and I ask to speak for up to 15 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you. Nearly 10 years after the September 11th terrorist attacks, our country remains at war with violent extremists who want to kill Americans. And yet the administration has not designated a secure location for detaining, interrogating, and trying current and future terrorist detainees. Rather than seeking to address this problem, the administration continues to insist on closing Guantanamo Bay. Earlier this week, Attorney General Holder in Paris reiterated the administration's determination to ultimately close the Guantanamo Bay facility. This determination to close Gitmo represents a misguided view that treats terrorism like everyday crime, hesitates to call this war on terrorism what it is, and places the perceptions of others over the safety of Americans. I believe this desire to close Guantanamo represents an unacceptable abrogation of the federal government's most important responsibility, providing for the common defense. Therefore, today, I rise to introduce and to urge my colleagues to support Senate Bill 944, the Detaining Terrorists to Secure America Act of 2011. Our diligent intelligence professionals and our brave Special Operations Forces who brought bin Laden to justice don't need to be reminded that the United States and our international partners remain engaged in a war with violent Islamist partners, extremist groups, including al-Qaeda and associated terrorist groups that are committed to killing Americans and our allies. Indeed, in the treasure trove of information our forces gathered at bin Laden's compound, we have learned that the terrorist groups are actively plotting new attacks against our country. This is the latest in a long string of attacks or planned attacks against our country in the last 2 years alone. Just some of the examples of what we have seen. In September 2009, the plot to conduct a suicide bomb attack on the New York subway system, to the November 2009 attack on Fort Hood that killed 13 people and wounded 32, to the Christmas Day 2009 attempted bombing on an international flight to Detroit, to the May 2010 attempt to bomb Times Square, to the October 2010 attempt to send explosives to Jewish centers in Chicago, to a February 2011 plot to manufacture explosives and to conduct attacks in Texas and in New York. Al-Qaeda and their fellow terrorists continue to threaten our country. Bin Laden's death is a significant blow to Al-Qaeda and associated terrorist organizations, and a great accomplishment for our country. But the threat continues, and our detention policies must reflect that reality. Since 2009, we have captured and detained thousands of terrorists who have planned and conducted attacks and who have served as terrorist trainers, financiers, bomb makers, bodyguards, recruiters, and facilitators. Interrogations of these terrorists, including those at Guantanamo, have provided valuable intelligence that has prevented attacks, saved lives, and helped locate other terrorists. And we're not talking about just protecting Americans, which is, of course, the core function of our government, but we're also talking about protecting our allies and others around the world by detaining and making sure we gather valuable intelligence at Guantanamo Bay. Of course, the most recent and noteworthy example that demonstrates the value of intelligence gleaned from detainee interrogations is the case of Osama bin Laden. Our intelligence community would never have found bin Laden if it weren't for the intelligence gleaned from the interrogation of terrorist detainees. Not only have interrogations of detainees helped us track down other terrorists, but detainee terrorists have helped us prevent, the intelligence gathered from detainee terrorists have helped us prevent future attacks. Unfortunately, as Secretary Gates confirmed in response to my question during an armed services hearing in February, detainees who have left Guantanamo Bay that have been released, approximately 1 out of 4, or 25% of the detainees that have been released, have actually re-engaged, gotten back in the fight against us, and are committing attacks against us and our allies. I can tell you, as a former prosecutor, that is an unacceptable recidivism rate. We shouldn't be allowing those individuals and terrorists out of Guantanamo to get back in the theater, to be in a position to once again harm us and our allies. Former Guantanamo detainees are conducting suicide bombings, recruiting radicals, and training them to kill Americans and our allies. Saeed al-Shahiri and Abdul Zakir represent 2 examples of former Guantanamo detainees who have returned to the fight and assumed leadership positions in terrorist organizations, who are dedicated to killing Americans and our allies. Saeed al-Shahiri is now working as the number 2 in al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. After a recent promotion, Abdul Zakir now serves as a top Taliban military commander and a senior leader in the Taliban's Quetta Shura. In the world of terrorists, it has become a badge of honor to have served at Guantanamo and then to have been released and then to get back into the fight against us. It is unacceptable for even one released detainee to re-engage in the fight against our country. As a military spouse and as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I find it sickening that our country has released dangerous prisoners who are now actively plotting to kill Americans, soldiers and Americans who just want to go about their way of life, and also our allies who work closely with us. Some have expressed concerns regarding the legality of long-term detention for these terrorists, or expressed concerns about the conditions at Guantanamo. I'd like to address both of those concerns. First, as the former Attorney General of the state of New Hampshire, I'm as eager as anyone to ensure that our detention policies conform to the rule of law and reflect our core values. Some have questioned the legality of detaining terrorists, yet we should be very clear. According to the law of war, detention is a matter of national security and military necessity and has long been recognized as legitimate under international law. Second, some have expressed concerns about the conditions at Guantanamo. In March, I visited the Guantanamo Bay detention facility. Gitmo now represents the most professionally run detention facility in the world. International human rights activists, reporters, members of the U.S. Congress and the Senate constantly stream through Guantanamo, checking on the conditions, holding the Department of Defense accountable for the conditions there. Guantanamo is no Abu Ghraib. Detainees are treated in a manner that conforms to international law and honors our values. Guantanamo detainees receive free meals a day, tailored to their preferences of each detainee. They also have access to top-notch health care facilities. Their religion is respected. They have television, newspapers, books, English and art classes. In fact, the officials at Guantanamo bend over backwards to respect the cultural and religious preferences of the detainees that are held there. Don't get me wrong, Guantanamo is no Club Med, but the terrorists that are detained there, most of whom would undoubtedly kill Americans if they were given the chance, are getting much better treatment than they deserve. And as a former prosecutor, I've been in a few prisons in my time, And I can tell you that the facility at Guantanamo Bay, the detention facility there, is much nicer than some that our common criminals are in the United States of America. As a former prosecutor, I was also impressed with the state-of-the-art courtroom at Guantanamo, which would rival any federal courtroom in the United States of America. However, unlike your average courtroom, it is set up to address the special security concerns associated with trying terrorists, and it is also specially designed to enable the judge to ensure that classified information will not be compromised, won't be leaked, and that it is protected on behalf of our country. This courtroom is the appropriate courtroom and venue for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and other 9/11 conspirators to be held accountable for the horrific attacks and their role in attacking our country on September 11th. And after almost 10 years, the victims of September 11th have waited much too long for justice. I believe our country stands on a solid legal framework in detaining terrorists according to the law of war, and I also believe that Guantanamo represents the ideal facility for detaining, interrogating, and trying current and future terrorist detainees. Some may ask, why introduce this legislation now? Why is it needed? In February, during a Senate Armed Services Committee, I asked Secretary Gates where we would detain high-value terrorists that we capture in the future if the President goes forward with his plan to close Guantanamo. Secretary Gates candidly said to me, I think the honest answer to that question is, we do not know. I was encouraged by President Obama's decision to resume military commissions at Guantanamo. Yet the administration was careful to reiterate its determination to ultimately close Guantanamo. Unfortunately, as I previously mentioned, on Monday, Attorney General Holder in Paris reiterated the administration's desire to close Guantanamo. But we know that Guantanamo was instrumental in providing a facility to gather intelligence to ultimately capture and kill Osama bin Laden. We know that there are other terrorists out there who want to do us harm, and we need to keep this facility open to make sure that Secretary Gates is not forced to answer, I don't know where we would keep the next high-value terrorist target that we capture in order to gather valuable intelligence. For this reason, I believe Congress must pass this legislation without delay. Before concluding, let me briefly summarize what Senate Bill 944 will do. This legislation reaffirms the authority to maintain Gitmo as an operating facility for the detention of current and future terrorists. It directs the Secretary of Defense to take actions to maintain Gitmo as an operating facility for the detention of current and future unprivileged enemy belligerents. It extends permanently the limitation of transfer of detainees to foreign entities and the prohibition of construction or modification of facilities in the United States of America for detaining terrorists. We've heard loud and clear from the American people they do not want terrorists detained on American soil. And finally, it supersedes the section of President Obama's executive order that he issued shortly after he got into office on January 22nd of 2009. He issued an executive order saying that Guantanamo would be closed, and this legislation will supersede that executive order related to the closure of Gitmo, the determination of transfer, the prosecution of terrorists in Article III courts, and military tribunals. In short, this legislation would establish Gitmo as the permanent location for detaining, interrogating, and trying unprivileged enemy belligerents, or terrorists. To accomplish this, we will permanently limit the transfer of detainees to foreign entities, because what has happened is that they are transferred there and they have been released, and that's why they are back in the battle against us. So we have to stop that. And this legislation will prohibit the construction or modification of facilities in the United States of America for detaining terrorists. To make sure that we do not detain terrorists here, we keep them at Gitmo and off the United States soil. I am proud to introduce this bipartisan legislation called Detaining Terrorists to Secure America Act of 2011, Senate Bill 944. I am especially proud that many friends and colleagues have decided to support this legislation, including Senators Graham, Lieberman, Chambliss, Brown, and Rubio, all of whom have been leaders when it comes to fighting terrorism and protecting Americans. Everything that we do in this chamber is guided by our Constitution, and the federal government must fulfill its most important constitutional duty of protecting the American people. Pretending we are not at war with terrorists will not change the fact that terrorists continue to plot against us and to attack Americans. Consistent with our values and the rule of law, we must establish the Guantanamo Detention Facility as the permanent location for detaining, interrogating, and trying terrorists. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I thank very much the President for hearing me today. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask that the proceedings of the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise to speak in support of the nomination of Arenda Wright Allen to serve as the next United States District Court Judge for the Eastern District of Virginia. I'm very pleased to see that our leadership came together to move this nomination forward. And I would like to recognize Chairman Leahy and Ranking Member Grassley for holding the nomination hearing and reporting Ms. Wright Allen's nomination by unanimous consent. Senator Webb and I had the privilege of interviewing several candidates to fill this vacancy on the bench. Ms. Wright Allen stood out for her exceptional qualifications and her impressive record in the Norfolk community. She spent her entire legal career in public service, beginning with her service as a JAG officer in the Navy. She also has the unique perspective of having served as both a prosecutor and a public defender. She spent 14 years serving as an assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia and 1 year in the Western District of Virginia. Today, Ms. Wright Allen is a federal public defender in Norfolk. Without a doubt, her extensive trial experience will go a long way on the bench. While I was considering Ms. Wright Allen's record, I read several letters of support for her nomination. In addition, the State Bar ranked Ms. Wright Allen as highly qualified, and the same highly qualified recommendation came by the Virginia Bar Association and the Virginia Women's Attorneys Association. I would also be remiss not to mention the historic nature of this nomination. Ms. Wright Allen would be the first African-American woman to serve as a federal district court judge in Virginia. I know she will serve with distinction and make all Virginians proud. Mr. President, President Obama nominated Ms. Wright Allen in January of this year. The time is now to confirm her nomination so that she can begin to serve the people in the Eastern District of Virginia. I look forward to casting my vote in support of Ms. Wright Allen's nomination and encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do the same. And I know the presiding officer, who has spent extensive time as a great attorney general and lawyer and attorney of great repute and respect, I hope that he will be able to join us in this effort. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Will the senator withdraw his request?
In terms of the absence of a quorum?
Yes.
Yes, I will be happy to withdraw my request.
Yes.
I thank the senator from Virginia. Let me.
Senator from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my understanding that we're in morning business till 2 o'clock.
That is correct.
All right. Yesterday I spent some time on the floor talking about the recoverable reserves that we have in the United States of America. And I was shocked that so many senators afterwards, first of all, I was shocked that many listened, but more shocked that they came up and said, we were not aware that we have this opportunity here. You know, we have, and I've got from the Congressional Research Service, a breakdown of where all of this is. I'd like to share that and get that into the record, because right now, and I applaud Senator Murkowski and others for trying to open up and fully develop the resources that we have in the Gulf of Mexico. That is very significant. I applaud their effort, and I join them in that effort. I would like to say we need to go further than that, because in the Gulf of Mexico we have, and these are figures, Mr. President, of the Congressional Research Service under the undiscovered technically recoverable resources. Now, our resources, according to CRS, are greater than any other country in the world in oil, gas, and coal. I'm just going to talk about gas right now, because one of the big issues, of course, not just with my wife, but with others, is the price of gas at the pumps. If you look at the undiscovered technically recoverable resources in just on the onshore in the United States, so this would actually be public land, it's 37.8 billion barrels of oil. Throw in Alaska, that would be 26.6 barrels. At the Atlantic Ocean, 3.8, Pacific Ocean, 10.5, the Gulf of Mexico, as I already said, 44.9. Now, the total that they have of U.S. endowment of our endowment of technically recoverable oil is $162.9 billion. We've talked about this before and talked about the fact that we have all these resources, but our problem is a political problem because the people, the politicians, won't let us reach these. Now, we're talking about they're not able to get hardly any on the Atlantic and Pacific, and you know what's happened up in the North Slope, ANWR, we've talked about that for a long time. People don't realize in public lands that about 90% is off limits politically. Now, that is there. Now, I have to correct some of the statements. Some people have conveniently misrepresented what our reserves are. Instead of using recoverable reserve, they use proven reserves. Well, that's a technical term that in order to prove a reserve, you have to drill and analyze and core and see how much oil is in there. Obviously, if we won't let anyone drill, they can't prove it. So when they say we'll only have 2% of the world's proven reserves, that's absurd because you have to drill to determine what that is. Other countries don't have that problem because we're the only country in the world who doesn't let us, here in the United States of America, exploit our own resources. And I think that people are going to have to realize this. If you want to do something, it's such a simple thing to deal with. It's supply and demand, and there's not a person in here, not a person who would be listening today, who hasn't gone through the elementary experience in schooling of learning supply and demand. We have the supply in America, but we don't have and we have the demand here. The politicians won't let us exploit our own resources. That's the problem that we have. So you don't have to overly complicate this thing. It's interesting, and I hate to say it, you know, I'm not pointing fingers in a partisan way, but when the Democrats and the administration say we're going to tax big oil, well, they say actually they're going to do away with some of the benefits that the big oil has. Well, there aren't benefits. This would be 4 huge tax increases that the Democrats are talking about doing on big oil. That's not big oil. That's oil, period. And I won't go into the details of depletion allowances, percentages, and all of that. It's not important. The point is that they have the same benefit every other manufacturer has, and to single them out and say we're going to punish big oil, all that's going to do is make the price at the pumps skyrocket. It gets right back to supply and demand. And by the way, those who are trying to use the argument that this somehow is going to produce revenue that is going to be used, I would suggest to you that even the White House's figures are the maximum would be revenue generated $4 billion. Now, keep in mind, you lose all the benefits, so that's not a net of $4 billion. Take the state of Texas, for example. They don't have an income tax. They have the oil tax that has run that state very well for a long period of time. And I have a quote from the Okay, anyway, so Senator Menendez made a statement and said that this is not, taxing the oil companies is not going to bring down the price of gas. So they're not even claiming that it will. So I just think when you see such an obvious solution to a problem, just exploit our own resources, then I'd say that we are very foolish not to do that. I want to cover one other thing that I think is significant. When I talk to people about and we all talk about the solutions to the problem. We talk about the spending of this administration. More debt increased in just the first 2 years of the Obama administration than the entire debt that was increased since George Washington in the history of this country. The huge spending, the $5 trillion in the president's 3 budgets of deficit. I can remember coming down and complaining back in 1995 at this very podium when the Clinton administration came out with a budget for fiscal year 1996, and it was $1.5 trillion, and I said, we can't sustain that. Now, it's $1.5 trillion in each of the 3 budgets they have, just the deficit. That's more than it took to run the entire United States of America back in 1996. So I suggest when people say there are only 2 solutions to this problem, either reduce spending, which would be my choice, or increase taxes, which I wouldn't do, but there's a third option. That option is to do something about the cost of regulation, Right now, if you just take what the EPA is doing in fact, I'll just say 3 of the 5 major over-regulations that we're going under right now. People in this conference here, people in the United States Senate know that we have defeated cap and trade here legislatively by massive percentages 5 times since 2003. So this administration says, all right, if we can't have cap and trade, we're going to go ahead and do it, not legislatively, we'll do it through the EPA. And that's what's going on now with greenhouse gases. If you add up what the administration is doing in terms of what the cost is to have greenhouse gas regulations, that's between $300 and $400 billion a year. The ozone, if they do choose, and they said they're going to choose the 60 parts per billion standard, that would be $676 billion, and the boiler MAC would be something in excess of $1 billion. Anyway, you throw in utility MAC and cement MAC, it comes to $1 trillion. This is what I'm trying to get at. I used to use the figure that for every 1% increase in economic activity, it produces new revenue of $42 billion. That has been changed now. According to CRS, Congressional Review Service, and that's bipartisan, that's factual, and no one ever challenges them. CRS says for every 1%, and we will use GDP, increase in GDP, that produces an additional revenue of $50 billion. So if you just take these regulations, add them up, all these, the increase, the cost to GDP of the 3 regulations I mentioned, that's $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Now, if you take the fact that it's $14 trillion GDP in a given year, this would be 7% of that. For each 1%, it would be $50 billion. You could generate new revenue of $350 billion just by taking this overregulation out of our society. Now, you could argue, well, Inhofe, that's not true because these regulations aren't all passed yet. And that is right. So it would be probably right now about half of that. But when the Obama administration came in and they announced these regulations were coming, the manufacturers, the producers, those who are driving the economic ship were the ones who said, because of the uncertainty of these regulations, we're going to slow down what we're doing. If we were to lift all these regulations, then I can assure you that we would be approaching, at least by a year from now, $350 billion. That's without a tax increase. That's without reducing spending. And I think that we need to look at this realistically because this is an opportunity that we have. A lot of people remember back in the days of Ronald Reagan. And I could say the same thing back in the days of President Kennedy. And, of course, he was a Democrat. They felt that overregulation and high taxation is an inhibiting factor to slow down revenue. And, of course, in the case of Ronald Reagan, the total revenue coming from marginal rates in 1980 was $244 billion. In 1988, it was $466 billion. And that was at a time when we had the largest reduction of taxes and regulations in this society. So it's shown to be true over the years. My bottom line is this. People know about spending and people know about taxes. They don't know about regulations. The people who are affected directly, the manufacturers, they all understand it. And the figures that I'm using are actual figures that we've gotten that no one argues with. And the fact that $50 billion of increased revenue comes from each 1% increase in GDP is a fact that is supported by the CRS. So I offer that along with our opportunity to become totally independent from the Middle East for our ability to run this machine called America. And with that, Mr. President, before I yield the floor, I see the senator from Alaska. I hope that you were listening to what I was talking about because the opportunities in Alaska are just tremendous. 26.6 billion barrels of oil. And I'm sure that you understand that. And I want to make sure everybody else does. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Hickok.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alaska is recognized.
Are we in a quorum call?
Yes.
I ask they vacate the quorum call.
Without objection, so ordered.
I'd like to, Mr. President, be able to speak and get consent to speak as if in morning business.
The senator has that right until 2 o'clock, and then the Senate proceeds into executive session.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. And to my friend who just spoke a little bit ago from Oklahoma, absolutely I'm aware of the quantity and the value of Alaska oil and gas. And today I rise to discuss this issue as well as a few others related to the issues of oil and gas. I rise today to discuss an issue foremost on the minds of my constituents and the concern to all Americans, the rising cost of energy. I want to outline the proposals aimed at providing short-term relief for high prices at the pump and to assure America's long-term energy security. These are the issues which have been discussed many times in these chambers. The time for talk is past. The time to act is now, Mr. President. High energy prices today already are pinching pocketbooks of families and crippling our small businesses across my state and across this country. When I was home over the recess, I visited the roaded areas of Alaska. These are communities connected by our highway and road system, from Kenai Peninsula to Fairbanks, where gas prices were well over $4 a gallon. As you can see by the poster next to me, they ranged from $4.15 a gallon to $4.35 a gallon. These prices might look good to some of my colleagues who saw gas prices over $5 a gallon in their home states, but off the road system in Alaska, prices are much, much higher. The fact is, prices for gasoline and home heating oil never came down in rural Alaska. They've been well over $5 a gallon for years. Some places, such as Anaktuvuk Pass, are nearly $10 a gallon. I started a discussion with Alaskans on Facebook to just see how these high prices are affecting their budgets. Some families are already facing really tough choices to make their budgets balance. For families commuting into Anchorage from Mat-Su Valley every day, they are forced to pay more than $100 a week to fuel up. That's more than a pocketbook pinch, it's a punch. And even worse, families know the price isn't coming down anytime soon, and even though speculation ranges all over the places,
Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, the Judiciary, Orenda L. Wright Allen of Virginia to be United States District Judge for the Eastern District of Virginia.
Under the previous order, there will be 1 hour of debate with respect to the nomination, with the time equally divided in the usual form. The senator from Alaska is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask consent to speak as if in morning business for up to 7 additional minutes, that the time be counted against the Democratic side, and that my speech in the congressional record not be split.
Without objection, so ordered.
And even worse, families know the price isn't coming down, as I mentioned. It's continuing to rise. And it's not just affecting families, it's affecting businesses. They feel the sticker shock also at the pump. We're seeing businesses through rising food and delivery prices to make up the difference. These families and businesses expect us to act now, no more excuses. Energy is one place where we should be able to find bipartisan common ground. I've been calling for a comprehensive energy bill from day one in the Senate. Our lack of progress on this is frustrating. We were real close last spring, but now here we are again. We need to provide Americans reliable and affordable energy in 3 ways: short-term relief for consumers, new renewable energy sources for reliable electricity prices, and keep strong investment in alternative transportation systems, and increase domestic oil and gas production so we're not dependent on unfriendly foreign sources. First, the short term, which I call the pocketbook relief. We must help families keep their budgets balanced and help ensure that increasing consumer confidence doesn't falter. To that, I've introduced a family account to save on transportation, the FAST Act, to help families get through the high gas prices over the next 2 years. This bill will allow employers to set up pre-tax transportation savings accounts, just like medical savings accounts, to help offset the pain of high gas prices on the family pocketbook. The bill will sunset in 2 years, so it will have no long-term burden on the federal budget. Second, we have to bring online alternative power sources to buffer power companies from price shocks of rising oil and gas prices. No matter where you are in Alaska, you don't have to go far to find alternative energy sources, wind and tidal, geothermal and hydro. Even in these tough budget times, this is a good investment to strengthen our economy far into the future. The same is true for alternative transportation systems and fuels. We must fully support efforts to develop electric, hybrid, and highly efficient vehicles. At the same time, we must recognize most working families cannot afford to purchase a new vehicle. So we need to find other ways to reduce their transportation costs, such as greater investment into city-to-city commuter services. The recent investment in high-speed rail is positive, but is not reaching most of the country and will not. Even in Alaska, we have the potential for commuter rail. It is critical to move commuters from city to city and cutting the $100 a week gas prices that our folks from Mat-Su pay as they drive into Anchorage for employment. Solving our energy security challenge cannot just focus on reducing consumption. Yes, it's important, but we must cut the use, as is identified through consumption, that we need to reduce fossil fuels in all sectors, especially transportation. But we also need to increase our domestic production. Every new oil and gas development buys our country more energy security and national security, while also creating American jobs. Unfortunately, we're going in the wrong direction. 30 years ago, 28% of our oil was imported. Today, 60%. And while our largest share of oil imports come from Canada, too much is coming from unstable countries or those openly hostile to the United States. Not only will we become increasingly dependent on these countries for our oil, but we are exporting over $1 billion a day. Let me repeat that. $1 billion a day we export. In my home state, Alaska, we have vast potential to increase America's energy security. The fact is, developing Alaska's oil and gas resources buys our country decades of energy security by offsetting foreign imports from unfriendly countries. Consider a few examples, which I have here on the board next to me. Developing offshore resources in the Chukchi, up in this area, in the Beaufort Sea, will produce 1.8 million barrels of oil a day. This is easily enough to offset oil imports from Saudi Arabia. You could even cover Iraq, too. Developing the oil beneath the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, ANWR, could offset imports from Nigeria. Developing the CD5 project in the National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska. Let me repeat that again. The National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska, set up for petroleum products and production. And BP's Liberty project could replace daily imports from Libya. This does not even include the tremendous on- and offshore natural gas resources we have in Alaska. 1/3 of the country's supply in Alaska. So why aren't we developing these enormous resources in my state? 2 words: politics and bureaucrats. Mr. President, earlier this year, President Obama went to Brazil, where he declared that America wants to be a customer for Brazilian oil and natural gas. I got to say, you don't need to go too far. You don't need to go to Brazil to do that. You can do it right here in Alaska with our people, our resources, our opportunities. I remind the President of that, and I'll remind him on a regular basis. To his credit, I will say later in the month, he did mention Alaska. Alaska, in his call for energy and domestic energy independence, he mentioned Alaska. Unfortunately, the bureaucrats in his administration are not listening. They are not. They are tossing up barriers in additional Alaskan oil and gas production every chance they get. Sadly, some of my colleagues in this body are not much better. Instead of addressing the problem with specific solutions, they are going for headlines by dragging energy company executives before committees or promising the roadblock or proposing that roadblock roadblock incentives for increased domestic energy production, some of which have been on the books for decades. Let's stop the headline grabbing and get serious about the energy security. I have 3 ideas. First, better coordinate the federal offshore permitting process. I introduced legislation before recess to create the Arctic OCS coordinated model after legislation that late Senator Ted Stevens passed, establishing the Federal Gas Pipeline Coordinator. My bill addresses the problem too many projects are caught in. What I call the...
Senator, currently used 7 minutes.
I'd ask for an additional 3 minutes.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.